I wrote 100 pages about sleep, and what I found will change the way you sleep forever. No, it's not wearing red glasses, having a $5,000 mattress, or taking enough melatonin to kill a bear. I'm talking about the 3 things that 99% of people don't do that gives you perfect sleep every time. And if you don't believe me, here are my and my clients' sleep scores. Nowadays, there is a tsunami of sleep experts online showing you all of the flashy sleep tricks that are guaranteed to improve your sleep. I have read and wrote over 100 pages on sleep to find out what actually works, and you only need to follow 3 easy steps. I've tested this meticulously over the last few years to the point where anyone can use it and see results today. You know how it feels? You're tired, low energy, and feel like any amount of effort is torture. But if you follow these steps, you will wake up feeling energized, clear-headed, and motivated to work. And it all starts with the sleep equation. The most common advice you'll get on how to improve your sleep is that you need to sleep for 8 hours. But here's the problem. There is a particular phase of sleep that is the most important for brain function, focus, and energy levels. This phase is REM sleep, and it mostly takes place in the last 4 hours of your regular 8-hour sleep window. But the reason this is a problem is because if you do get 8 hours of sleep, like most people will tell you, if you go to bed at 10 p.m. and set your alarm for 6 a.m., this means that you're not sleeping for 8 hours, but you're actually sleeping for 6.5 to 7 hours. This happens because you will have particular parts of the night that you're awake for. I've got hundreds of thousands of hours worth of sleep data over the last 3 years of helping hundreds of successful entrepreneurs optimize their sleep. And one of the things you'll quickly realize once you start tracking your sleep is that you can be awake for anywhere from 15 minutes if your sleep is really good, up to 1 hour plus if your sleep is average like most people. So if we take 8 hours in bed, deduct the awake time, you're only sleeping for 6 to 7 hours. And knowing that REM sleep mostly occurs in the last 4 hours of your 8-hour sleep, you won't be able to get the maximum out of your recovery. So what you need to do instead is to allow for 9 hours in bed. That way, even if you're awake for 30 to 60 minutes throughout the night, you will still get 8 hours plus of total sleep, which will also maximize your REM sleep. And I know what you might be thinking. Oh, 9 hours of sleep is too much. I'd rather work for 1 extra hour instead. But think about this. If you're performing at a 6 out of 10 in regards to your energy, focus, and productivity on a daily basis, and the only change you make from now on is to get 1 extra hour of REM sleep, that number, I guarantee you, will go from a 6 to an 8 out of 10. So if you're working 10 hours a day at a 6 out of 10, which basically means you're working 6 meaningful hours, let's say you take that 1 extra hour away from your work and put it to sleep, and as a result, you're now working 9 hours a day at an 8 out of 10. This means that you're working 7.5 meaningful hours. In other words, you're working less but getting more things done because you have more energy, more mental clarity, and more focus. But here's another problem that might come up. Now, imagine preparing to go to bed, setting your alarm for the next day to make sure you get 9 hours in bed, then you shut your eyes and your brain starts racing 1 million miles an hour. Thought after thought after thought comes in your brain and it takes you ages to fall asleep. This happens because your CNS is not primed for sleep. And so here's where something called CNS priming comes into play. When you're working throughout the day, your body's survival mechanisms switch on and your body produces cortisol and adrenaline to keep you awake, alert, and focused. This survival mechanism is the fight or flight response of your nervous system. Your autonomic nervous system has 2 divisions: the fight or flight mode, which is scientifically called the sympathetic nervous system, and the rest and digest mode, which is scientifically called the parasympathetic nervous system. You see, when you're trying to be productive every day and try to do your best to stay energized and awake while working, your body will automatically try and activate the fight or flight mode, which will be activated for the majority of the day. The problem with this is that because your body is producing adrenaline and cortisol all day to keep you awake and alert, the scale between the fight or flight and the rest and digest is completely imbalanced. There is a scale that needs to be in balance between these 2 parts of your nervous system. And if you're on the go, hustling all day, fight or flight mode switched on consistently, if you don't know how to land the plane smoothly by priming your CNS for recovery, well, the plane landing, instead of looking like this, it will look something like this. And there are 3 key rules you need to stick to in order to prime your CNS for recovery. Number 1, first of all, stop drinking caffeine 10 hours before bed. Caffeine is a stimulant, which means that it stimulates your nervous system to produce adrenaline and cortisol, which activates your fight or flight response. You see, caffeine has a half-life of 5 hours, which means that it will take around 10 hours for it to get completely out of your system. So if you go to bed at 11 p.m., make sure to stop drinking coffee at 1 p.m. the latest. Number 2, in the last 2 to 3 hours of the day, completely eliminate all overhead bright lights from your house. Replace them with below eye level firelight colors like these. You have specific cells in your eyes that are naturally designed to detect overhead light and wake you up as a response. They were made to specifically detect sunlight to keep you awake throughout the day. But if 2 to 3 hours before your bedtime, you're still exposed to normal everyday indoor lights, aka bright overhead lights, these cells will be falsely triggered and will wake you up, block melatonin production, and will confuse your brain into thinking that it's still early in the day. Number 3, and lastly, in the last 1 to 2 hours of the day, avoid any stimulating, mentally heavy work. If you take calls and do mentally heavy work in the last couple hours away from your bedtime, you will still trigger the fight or flight response from your nervous system. And as a result, at the time you'd want your body to produce sleepiness chemicals like melatonin, it's still producing energy chemicals like adrenaline and cortisol, still keeping you awake. So deep work, sales calls, and any form of activity that requires intense thinking and hypes you up or wakes you up, don't do it in the last 1 to 2 hours of the day. But let's say you're in bed for 9 hours and you're priming your CNS for sleep. There's another thing a lot of people do wrong here, and it's a mistake that can cause toxic waste buildup in the brain, which can lead to things like Alzheimer's. And it's so common that more than 93% of US adults do this big mistake. It's the brain detox pathway. You see, one of the most common habits people have is eating late. And this is not a problem because if you eat late, you gain fat easier, but because of the brain detox pathway. The brain detox pathway, scientifically called the glymphatic system, is activated when your brain enters a phase of sleep called deep sleep. More specifically, the brain detox pathway is activated only when your brain enters deep sleep fasted. When your brain works normally throughout the day, it leaves toxic byproducts behind. These toxic byproducts are things like beta amyloid or tau proteins. Sticky toxic proteins that, if not properly cleared out of the system, they can build up and cause neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, or dementia. The thing that clears those toxic byproducts out of the system is the glymphatic system, which needs to be activated on a daily basis with you entering the phase of sleep called deep sleep fasted. And what you need to do to enter deep sleep fasted is to do the opposite of what 93% of US adults do. More specifically, you want to eat your last meal of the day 3 to 6 hours before bed, because the moment you start fasting does not begin when you eat your last bite, because while you may not have food in your mouth at this point, your stomach and digestive tract does. And it takes around 3 to 6 hours, depending on the size of the meal, for you to enter a fasted state, which means eat your dinner around 3 to 6 hours before bed, depending on the size of the meal. Doing this will not only make sure that you clear out all of the toxic sticky proteins out of your brain every night, but also your body will use all of its resources to recover at 100% every night, simply because it does not need to give energy in order to digest your food while sleeping like most people do. But here's the kicker. If your goal is to wake up feeling good and be able to get stuff done in the day, then the 3 steps I gave you today are all you need for sleep. But if you belong in the subsection of people who truly want to maximize their productivity, energy, and focus to be able to get as much stuff in as little time as possible and perform at a superhuman level every single day, then I'll show you a protocol I've personally made hundreds of successful entrepreneurs follow in order to help them maximize their potential at work and make more money while working less. So check out this video on the screen where I show you what this protocol is and how you can use it too, so you can maximize your work output and productivity.